Hey guys, welcome to part 2 of my fox tutorial. In part 1, we just finished our fox's head, which I have right here. Now in part 1, I did mention everything you need to create one of these foxes, but in this video, I will mention what you'll need again, just because we're only creating the body for this video. So for the body, you won't need too much, but I'll let you know what you'll need in the next couple of clips. I will be using a 4mm crochet hook, a stitch marker, threading needle, and some scissors. For the yarn, I'll just be using one color today for the body, and I will be using the same orange I had in part 1. This is the Red Heart Super Saver yarn in the color Carrot. And I'll also be using some stuffing, but you might also want to grab a pen and paper because you will be doing a couple rows of single crochets, and just to keep track, you just want to have a pen and paper on hand. To create our body, we're going to start from the bottom up, and we're starting off with a magic circle. So what I like to do is I take my yarn and ignore my Cheeto fingers, but take your yarn and I like to hold it against my fingers. I put my thumb down on the yarn so I can hold it in place, and then I'll take the yarn and wrap it around 3 fingers. And then when I get back to the top, I'll cross over to create an X. And then I'll just bring the rest of the yarn back down, and I'll take my pinky and just place it on top of the yarn. I'm not holding it too tight, just enough so I can keep it in place. So now we have this X here, and I'm going to put my hook through the circle, and I'm going to grab this yarn and pull it through the circle. So I'm going to take my crochet hook, insert it inside the circle, and then remember I said I'm going to grab this piece of the yarn and pull it through, and then I'll twist it up. So now that I have a loop on my hook, I'm going to go and get this yarn again, so the same X on this side. I'm going to just take my hook down, and I'll grab that yarn and pull it through. And then I'll let go to show you the circle, and then now I'll just tighten it up. And that is our magic circle. We're going to single crochet 6 times into our magic circle for round 1. So I'm just going to pull on this yarn here just to make it a little bit smaller. And now I'm going to take my crochet hook, and I'm crocheting around this circle and this yarn piece as well. So let's take our crochet hook and insert it inside the circle. Let's grab that yarn and pull it through. So I have 2 loops on my hook. I'm yarning over and pulling through both loops. So that was a single crochet, and we have to do it 6 times. So I'll go again into my circle, grabbing this yarn and pulling it through. Then I have 2 loops on my hook. I'm yarning over and pulling through both. So now I'll just do that 4 more times. And before I do my last one, I like to take my yarn and just pull on it to make the circle smaller. And then I'll do my last single crochet into the circle. Oops, the yarn splits. Okay, so I'll go into the circle and do my last single crochet. And then that's the end of round 1. So I'll take my stitch marker and place it into the last stitch. For round 2, we're going to increase into every stitch. So here's my first stitch. I'm taking my crochet hook and inserting it into the stitch, grabbing this yarn and pulling it through. I have my 2 loops. I'm yarning over and pulling through both for a single crochet. Now to make it an increase, I have to do 1 more into the same stitch. So going into the same stitch, grabbing this yarn and pulling it through. I have my 2 loops on the hook. I'm yarning over and pulling through both. So that was my first increase. Now I'm going to show it one more time by going into the next stitch, inserting my hook through, grabbing this yarn, pulling it through. There's my 2 loops, yarning over, pulling through both. So I'll do another one into the same stitch, because that's an increase. And now I'm just going to repeat that into every stitch until I end up with 12 stitches in total for round 2. Just finished round 2 and I have my 12 stitches. So now let's move on to round 3, where we're still doing our increasing rounds. So let's start off with an increase into the first stitch, and remember, an increase is 2 single crochets into the same stitch. So that was 1 and 2. Now we're going to follow that by single crocheting into the next stitch. So there's my next stitch. I'm just going in, grabbing that yarn, there's the 2 loops on the hook, yarning over and pulling through both. So now I'm just going to repeat those steps all the way through until I get 18 stitches in total, and I will demonstrate one more time. So going into my next stitch, I have to start off with an increase. So that was 1 and 2 into the same stitch, And now we have to follow that by single crocheting into our next stitch. And now I'm just going to repeat this all the way through until I get 18 stitches in total in round 3. Okay, so now moving on to round 4, let's start off with an increase into the first stitch. So here's my first stitch. I'm doing my 2 single crochets into that stitch. And then I'm going to follow that by single crocheting into the next 2 stitches. So let's just go in and do 1 single crochet into each of those. And now I'll have to repeat that all the way through until I get 24 stitches in total in round 4. And I'll demonstrate one more time. So going into that next stitch, I'll do my increase first. So that was 1 and 2 into the same stitch. Now I'm single crocheting into the next 2 stitches. So just 1 single crochet into each of those. And now I'm just going to repeat those steps all the way through until I get my 24 stitches in total in round 4. For round 4, this is what it looks like, and you can see we're just expanding our circle, and we have to do that for a couple more rows. So for round 5, let's start off by increasing into the first stitch. So let's go into our first stitch and do our 2 single crochets into that stitch. That was my first one. Now doing my second. Now I'm going to follow that by single crocheting into the next 1, 2, 3 stitches. So just do 1 single crochet into each of those stitches. That was my second one, and moving on to the third right here. And now I'm just going to repeat that all the way through until I get my 30 stitches in round 5, and I'll demonstrate once more. So going into my next stitch, I'm starting off with an increase. So that was 1 and 2. And then I'm single crocheting into the next 1, 2, 3 stitches. So remember, just 1 single crochet into each of those. And then I'm just going to repeat those steps all the way through until I get my 30 stitches in round 5. Now for round 6, we're going to start off the same way by increasing into that first stitch. So let's go into that first stitch and do our single crochets. I just did 1 and now doing my second. And now we're going to follow that by single crocheting into the next 1, 2, 3, 4 stitches. So let's just do 1 single crochet into each of those. So that was my second, third, and fourth. Okay, so you can probably guess what we're doing next. We have to repeat those steps all the way through until we get our 36 stitches. So I'm going to demonstrate one more time by going into my next stitch and starting off with an increase. So I just did my first single crochet and now I'm doing my second. And then I'm going to follow that by single crocheting into the next 4 stitches. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. We're just doing 1 single crochet into each of those stitches. And then after I finish that, I'm going to repeat those steps all the way through until I get 36 stitches in total in round 6. We're going to take a bit of a break from our increases for round 7 because in round 7 we're just going to be single crocheting this entire round. So if you single crochet into each one of these stitches, your stitch count won't change, so you should still end up with 36 stitches in total in round 7. Now because these are just single crochets, I'll just finish this off camera and then I'll be back to show you how we're going to increase in round 8. We are now on round 8, and thankfully this is our last increasing round. So for this round, let's start off by going into our first stitch with an increase. So let's go in and do our 2 single crochets into that stitch. I just did my first one, and now I did my second into that same stitch. Now we're going to follow that by single crocheting into the next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stitches. So single crochet into each one of those stitches, and then if we repeat this all the way through, we're going to end up with 42 stitches in total, and I should stop talking because I'm losing my count. So I think that was 2, 3, is that right? 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, this is 5. Okay, and now we have to repeat those steps all the way through until we get our 42 stitches. Demonstrate that one more time since I even confused myself. So going into my next stitch, I'm starting off with an increase. So that was 1 and 2 into the same stitch, and then now I'm following that by single crocheting into the next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stitches. So just do 1 single crochet. So that was my first, second, third, fourth, and fifth. So now I'm just going to repeat those steps all the way through until I get my 42 stitches in this round, and this is round 8. After round 8, this is what the bottom of our fox is going to look like. So this is where he kind of sits down. So for round 9 to 28, you're just doing all single crochets. So this is where you will most likely need a pen and paper or any way you want to keep track of it, because they're all single crochet rounds and you might get confused if you're not writing it down. But it is rounds 9 to 28 that you're just going to single crochet. Now, because it's a single crochet round, you're not changing any stitch count. That means you're going to have a total of 42 in each of those rounds, and we're just creating the length right now. I just wanted to grab my fox really quick to show you that we're creating the length about up to right here, and then we're going to start decreasing. Now, I know this is a lot of rows, so remember, just keep track of it. It's rounds 9 to 28, and I won't demonstrate this on camera because they're all just single crochets. And again, if you made it to like part 2 already, you know what a single crochet is. So just do those rounds, and then I'll be back once I have part of my body finished, and then I'll show you how we can decrease. Actually, I will just show some of this on camera because it gives me an excuse to talk in this video, but well, talk besides telling you how to crochet something. But I was filming yesterday's video, the fox head, and I didn't expect that video to be an hour long, and I was so nervous it wouldn't save because of my storage space. I literally deleted everything on my phone, and it was really weird how it saved, because I could save it in HD form, but all of a sudden I tried to do it in a higher quality and it didn't work. So I was like wondering what was wrong, because I tried to go back to my original HD form, and then yeah, I couldn't do it. So I literally took all day trying to upload it again. So if that quality isn't that good, it's because it was an hour long, and for some reason, I'm not sure if anyone else like uses iMovie, but it doesn't connect to YouTube anymore. So I have to save it directly to my phone, which is why I have the storage issues, because usually I can upload it directly to YouTube, but now I guess they aren't working together because it's completely gone. And I was googling how I can fix that, but I guess a lot of people are having issues with it. So yeah, that's why I always complain about storage space, because usually I wouldn't have to worry since iMovie was connected with YouTube. But I think it was like last year where they stopped working with the apps together. So yeah, that was one thing I just wanted to say. But this is round 9 I'm working on right now. Is it 9? Yeah, I'm working on round 9 right now, so I have a long ways to go. And yeah, I think that's all I had to say. I just want to say that. I know you guys don't need to know that, but I just want to say it. Okay, anyways, I will finish rounds 9 to 28, and then I'll be back. Guys, I'm back, but I'm not finished with my rounds. I'm on round 28 right now, so this is the last round of the single crochets. But I wanted to pop back on because I have another story. It's not a big deal. I just want to tell you guys my story so I don't annoy my friends by texting them. But okay, so I went to walk my dog, and we were walking up this hill, and it's like it's not a big hill or anything, but I saw this guy walking his baby with his stroller and everything, and I was like, okay, not a big deal because my dog doesn't like really bark at people or anything. But as I'm walking up the hill and he's coming down, I can see him like looking towards my way, but I don't really like to make eye contact with people. But I was like, okay, he keeps staring my way, so I was like, I'll just say good morning when we walk by each other. So I look up. I usually look down when I'm walking because I don't know, I just do. But yeah, I look up and he's staring at me, so I was like, okay, good morning. And then he just looks at me but doesn't say anything. And I don't know if he couldn't hear me because I had my mask on. He wasn't wearing a mask, but I was wearing mine, and I did say good morning, but all he did was just stare at me the whole time. I was like, this is awkward. But yeah, that was really weird. And that's just my little story. Isn't it weird if you just, like, why do people stare at you, but when you say good morning, they don't say good morning back? Maybe it was because of my mask or something, but I was pretty sure he heard me. Yeah. Anyways, let me finish round 28, and then we're going to decrease at 29. Also, if you happen to be watching this in the future, I was wearing a mask because, you know, COVID's still going around over here and we have a lot of cases where I live, so that's why I was wearing a mask. But also the sidewalk was like really huge, so I wasn't really close to him anyways. But yeah, that's what happened. So now let's move on to round 29. Round 29, we're going to start decreasing. So let's start off with a decrease into this first 2 stitches right here. And we are doing an invisible decrease. So we're going into the front loop only. So let's take our crochet hook and insert it into the front loop. So you just push through the middle. And then now you want to do the same thing to the next stitch over. So bend your hook down and then push up into the next stitch into the middle. Now you have 3 loops on the hook. You want to yarn over, pull through the first 1, 2 loops, and then you have 2 loops left on the hook, so yarn over and pull through the last 2. So now you want to single crochet into the next 5 stitches. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'll single crochet into each one of those. This is my 3rd, 4th, and 5th. So now I'm just going to repeat that all the way through until I end up with 36 stitches in total in round 29, and I will demonstrate the invisible decrease again. So going into these 2 stitches right here, we're going into the front loop only. So I'll take my crochet hook, push up into the middle, bend my hook down, and do the same thing to the next stitch. I have my 3 loops on the hook. I'll yarn over, pull through the first 2, yarn over, pull through the last 2, and then I'll follow that by single crocheting into the next 5 stitches. So I just did 1. This is my 3rd, 4th, and my 5th. So now I'm just going to repeat these steps all the way through until I get my 36 stitches in total in round 29. After your decreasing round, you can see that it slightly starts to curve in just a bit, but I don't want to curve it in too much just yet. So for round 30, all we're going to do is a single crochet round. So we're just single crocheting into each one of these stitches, and because we're not doing anything else, you should still end up with a total stitch count of 36 in round 30. So I'll finish single crocheting this off camera, and then I'll be back to show you our next decreasing round for round 31. I just finished round 30, but before we continue on, you can go ahead and stuff this right now. So I do have a little bit of a tip. So when I stuff this, I'm going to use a little bit of my normal like filling, so this normal fiber fill right here. I'm just gonna stuff it at the bottom. But then I also like to go in with some other kind of fabric. So this is from the hospice. So one of the ladies who used to work there would save this for me because I like to use as filling sometimes. So I'm just going to take this, and because it's a little bit heavier, I feel like it helps the fox sit a little bit nicer. So if you have some other kind of fabric that's a little bit heavier, you can insert that as well. Now you don't have to use that. That's just a little tip that I like to do also, so you don't have to just throw away scraps from your other projects. So yeah, I just stuff that in there, and I feel like it will definitely help make it sit a little bit nicer. And then I'll just go in back with some of this other stuffing, and then I'll just kind of shape it to how I like, but it doesn't need to be perfect yet because we still need to continue on with closing this up. Once you're done stuffing up the project, we can now move on to round 31. And for round 31, we're going back to a decreasing round. So let's start off with a decrease into these 2 stitches right here. So let's go into the front loop only, bend your hook down just a bit to do the same thing to the next stitch. We have our 3 loops on the hook. We're yarning over, pulling through the first 2, yarn over, pull through the last 2. And now we want to single crochet into the next 1, 2, 3, 4 stitches. So just do 1 single crochet into each of those. This is my 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. Now we're going to repeat those steps all the way through until we end up with 30 stitches in total for round 31, and I'll demonstrate once more. So going into my next 2 stitches, I'll do my decrease. Start off with our invisible decrease. Let's go into the front loop only. We have our 3 loops on the hook. We're yarning over, pulling through the first 2, yarn over, pull through the last 2. Now let's single crochet into the next 1, 2, 3, 4 stitches. So I'm doing my single crochet into each of those. This is the third and fourth. So now I'm just going to repeat that all the way through until I get 30 stitches in round 31. I just finished round 31 and I do want to create a little bit more of length for this part. So for round 32 and 33, let's just single crochet both of those rounds. So you're still going to end up with 30 stitches in each of those rounds, and I will finish that off camera because they are just single crochets. So remember, just 2 rounds, which are rounds 32 and 33. Okay, so we're almost done because we have our last decreasing round. So for this round, this is round 34. And we're going to start off with a decrease into these 2 stitches. So let's just go into the front loop only because we are still doing our invisible decrease. You want to yarn over, pull through the first loop, pull through the next. My skin is so dry. Okay, so now let's single crochet into the next 1, 2, 3 stitches. And then you want to repeat those steps all the way through until you get 24 stitches in total. Okay, so now I will repeat that again. So let's go into our next stitches, or these 2 right here, to do our invisible decrease. We have our 3 loops on the hook. We're yarning over, pulling through the first 2, yarn over, pull through the last 2. Now let's single crochet into the next 1, 2, 3 stitches. So just 1 single crochet into each of those, and then after this you just want to repeat that all the way through until you get 24 stitches in total in round 34. And then after this we have 2 more rounds and we can sew this body to the head and we will be done with part 2. Okay, so after your last decreasing round, this is what it looks like. So now for rounds 35 and 36, we're just going to single crochet both of those rounds. And because you're just single crocheting, you will still end up with 24 stitches in each of those rounds. So I will finish that off camera and then I'll also stuff it a bit and I'll be back so I can show you how to sew this on. Just finished my last 2 rounds of crochets, which was round 35 and 36. So now I'm just going to, also I did stuff it and I ended up stuffing it some more at the top with the cotton fabric that I had, or this actually fleece, not cotton, but yeah, the fleece I had. And so I put that on the top and I didn't fill it all the way because when I sew it and I get close to sewing it all the way up, I'm going to just stuff a little bit more, but you do need a little bit more stuffing at the top because you want to make sure that it holds the head up. So now let's cut off some yarn, and you will need excess yarn because we are sewing this onto the head. So I'm just going to take about this much. So I'm just going to cut it off right here. And then you want to just pull your yarn straight out. And now we need our threading needle, which I have right here, and let's just insert our yarn through the needle. And now we can sew it onto the head. Before we sew this on, I do want to mention that I'm not the best at sewing. I tell you guys that all the time, but I'll show you how I do it. And if you have a better method, you can let me know in the comments, or you can try to follow along with what I'm going to say. All right, so to sew this on, what I like to do is just take the head, and I like to line it up. So where I have the yarn right now, I like to put this on the side of the head. So like I'll put it right here, kind of like on the cheek area, and then we're going to sew it from the front all the way to the back. That way you can have your face like aligned really nice. And what I do is I'll take my threading needle and I'll place it into a stitch that's closest to where it's lined up, so you can see it's right here. So I'm just going to put it in this stitch and just poke it through. If I can get it through. Okay, there it goes. And I'll just pull it through. And then when I go back down, I'm going into the next stitch. So you can see where my yarn is pulling out right now. It's from this one. So I'm going into the next stitch, which is this guy right here. And I'll just poke it through and pull it out. And then we have our first little part attached. So now we're going to go back into the face. So I kind of just want to align it to wherever the neck and the bottom of the head meets, or the bottom of the chin. So this stitch right here. and just poke it through, pull it, and then you go back into the next stitch. So it's this one here, because it didn't go through that one yet, and just pull it. So I'm just going to repeat that all the way through. It's just going from the head to the neck. I'll show you another one. So I'll go into this guy right here, matching up next to the neck, push it through, and then I'll go back into the stitch, and then I'll just close this up. I won't close it all the way because remember I said that I'm going to stuff it again. So once I get to the back side, I'll come back to show you how I stuff it. Did my yarn get stuck? Okay, there it goes. Yeah, so I'll come back to show you when I'm about halfway so we can finish stuffing the rest of the neck. So when you're sewing this, you can skip a couple of stitches if you feel like it looks a little bit off. Usually I'll skip some or I don't. It kind of just depends on how I'm feeling that day and how it looks. But today I did skip a couple of the stitches. So like I didn't go into the next one. I went into the one after when it went back down. But it all just depends on how it's starting to look. But now you can see I have a little bit of an opening left. So I'm going to take my stuffing and just put it in there so the neck can be a little bit more sturdy. And then I'll just finish sewing up the rest of the closing. Let's see, does that look good? Yeah, I feel like that looks good. So I'm just gonna finish sewing this up now after I stuffed it. And then once I officially go to the end of this, I'll come back to show you how I ended off. Okay, so I just finished reaching the end, so now I'm going to show you how I close it off. And I know it looks really weird right now, especially because we don't even have the ears on, but let's just focus on closing this up. So what I like to do is I'm going to take my threading needle and I'll push it through the back, and then what I'll do is I'll just go into the stitch that's closest to where I inserted that yarn. So I'll just go into this one and I'll push out through another side, so you can see my threading needle here, and I'm going to push out but not all the way because I want a little bit of the loop to stay out. So I'm going to hold on to this. You can see this loop right here. I'm going to take my threading needle and pull it into the loop, and that's just a little knot we can create. And then what I'll do next is just stuff it back in just to another side, and I'll just keep stuffing it back in until I'm closer to the bottom. So again, I'm going to go down a little bit more. And then now I'm going to stuff this yarn back in by using my scissors. You can use the back of your crochet hook if you like, but this is what I have on hand. So I'll just stuff this back in and then I'll be done with the body. I just finished sewing on the head and the body together and he looks so cute. He kind of looks like a bowling pin. You know what? I should do a series where I do a bowling pin style. So I'll keep this body portion and I'll just change the head. That would be so cool. But yeah, anyways, before I keep rambling, this is the end of part 2. So in part 3, I will be focusing on, I think the ears and then the tail. So yeah, I probably will film that next week. I'm not sure when these videos are going up yet, but if you don't see it up yet, it's because I haven't filmed that part yet. But yes, I will be filming the ears and tails for the next video, and the last video I think we're just going to be doing the arms and the hands. The arms and the hands. Sorry guys, I'm losing my mind now, but in part 4 it's going to be about the arms and then the legs. Well, technically, aren't they all legs? Okay, anyways, this is the end of part 2, so I'll see you guys in part 3.